I suspect the bifurcation you disagree with is how we separate higher education into humanities and science. But if I could just ask you to accept it just for one moment, I want to ask you a question based on that, which is the alarm that numbers of writers, columnists, I have in mind in particular Tom Friedman, even the White House is expressing about what they see as our falling behind in the teaching of science in universities. I know you're a professor. You've been a professor across a number of disciplines on both sides of that argument. Do you share that alarm that the Chinese and the Indians are training scientists and believing in science in a way that we are not, in a most sort of competitive spirit?
You know, Warren, I think, maybe I don't. I'm a big fan of China. I mean, I love China. I love Chinese people. I love Chinese history. I wish nothing for the best. That's one of the great things that's happened in the world, that China's played a role in this tremendous anti-poverty movement that we've had in the world in the last generation or two, really. It's absolutely wonderful transformation. But I don't think China is even going to be a player scientifically until they have a free, till they're a free people. So I make this unhappy prediction based on this thesis. If China is a major scientific power in 10 years and it's still a communist country, then my thesis of my book will have been proved wrong. I'm afraid that's not going to happen. The numbers that get cited, and India is another question. India's doing quite well, and America does have a concern about its scientific education. But those numbers tend to be more alarming. They look more alarming than they really are. What it takes to get an engineering degree in China and therefore show up as such a statistic is quite different than what we regard as an engineer here. I hope that won't always be the case. But, you know, Americans have been wringing their hands about this for a long time. When Sputnik went up, it was widely cited, and there's some quotes in my book about this, as an example of how a hard-driving totalitarian state that doesn't mess around with human rights or doesn't have to fiddle around with all these journalists objecting to everything can set its priorities, was the way it was always put, and can execute those priorities, and that's why they've gotten into orbit before we have. That was all false. There's never been a totalitarian state that was more efficient than a democracy. It's just a myth. And by the way, somebody finally went back and got the old Italian train records, and the trains did not run any better under Mussolini than they did the rest of the time.